X welcomes you.
You say you're not from Texas, man, as if I couldn't tell. Well, you think you pull your boots on right and wear your hat so well. So pardon me my laughter, as I sure do understand. Even Moses got excited when he saw the promised land. That's right. You're not from Texas. That's right, you're not from Texas. That's right, you're not from Texas. Texas wants you anyway. That's right, you're not from Texas. That's right, you're not from Texas.
Texas: The Big Picture is really a twofold reference. One, to the size of the IMAX experience mated with the size of a state like Texas, and number two, the big picture in all that it implies about taking a step back and saying, you know, in spite of my own little part of life here on Earth, there is a bigger picture that takes in people from all walks of life, involves all aspects of the human experience. It's the bigger picture of what life is about on the planet.
I think the most important feature about Texas that has become the theme of our movie that makes this movie so unique is how big the state is. It's so diverse, it is so big. The problem that we have is, how do you cut anything out? We're basically making a 39-minute movie, and there is enough material to make an hour-and-a-half movie with no problem. There's so many interesting regions of Texas. There's all this cultural diversity. It includes the music, it includes the food, it includes the architecture, it includes the geography, the weather, you name it. There is this enormous diversity because the state is so big.
Texas: The Big Picture is obviously about this great big state of ours, but it's also about the bigness of character and the bigness of spirit, the bigness of celebration, and the bigness that we all find in our hearts as Texans.
IMAX is the largest motion picture format in the world. There's no other medium that records as much information. There's no other medium that can put a viewer through what IMAX, what 1570 per film does. And to get to be a part of that kind of production, it's fun because it's big. This film's about Texas, which is big, and we found the format that goes along with the same bigness. We've gone Abilene and Dallas and San Antonio and Laredo and Austin. Yeah, it's a big place, and we've spent a lot of time in the car. But we have to get varied locations and show what the states are all about, and there are different things in different parts of the state. So that's been interesting and fun to get to see areas of Texas that I've not seen before.
Texas: The Big Picture isn't really a history lesson. We've got a great museum that gives people the whole history of Texas. What we tried to capture was the character and the spirit of Texas, not only the land, but the people, and how the two are intertwined together.
The Alamo is the icon of Texas history and has spiritual overtones that go well beyond its historical overtones. It's a place of reverence, and so deciding how to show the Alamo with due reverence to its history, and then also move into a situation that puts it in context of modern-day San Antonio, we came upon the idea that we would shoot it tight in the familiar setting, the way that most people are used to looking at it, and then we would create a sequence that showed its history, that perhaps gave you a feel for, you know, the event that made it famous, but without putting a lot of actors and reenactors and recreations in it. The way we chose to do it was to build a shadow and audio montage. As you see the images fall on that face of that hallowed building and hear this battle montage built in the soundtrack, you'll get a feel for what actually happened there for a few minutes. And then we needed to go up on the roof back away from it and show that although it was in fact a shrine sitting in the middle of Bexar County in the middle of nowhere, when it became the Alamo. Now it's in fact surrounded by a modern, thriving, commerce-filled city, and so we backed off and dollied back to show its setting in San Antonio today.
At the state fair, we were able to do several mounts, which IMAX really lends itself to, because if you can have the camera moving and hooked to a ride, or the way we went down one of those slippery slides, it's visceral. It gives people a real you are there kind of experience. So we made that a priority to try to get some of that. We mounted the camera to the Ferris wheel and shot at dusk with IMAX lenses. Some are very wide and really take in a lot of the surroundings. That worked terrifically.
The Riverwalk is a magic section of Texas for almost everyone, and particularly people from other states who go here remember, it seems, the Riverwalk specifically. And so to us, it's wound up in the music and in the Hispanic culture that's evident there. And so we tried to give people a riverboat feel, bringing into a great concert. We shot boat tours up the river. It's a remarkable place. I think the director's job in a movie actually is to act as kind of a specialized audience. I mean, your goal is to be what will eventually be the audience of the film, and try to figure out what they're going to like, and then use what you know about filmmaking to give them that experience. And so I always compare whatever I'm doing to, if I were the audience watching this shot, what would I want to see? What would be useful for me? You know, probably more than any other relationship on the crew, the relationship between the director and the director of photography is very important, because I tell him what I'm thinking and what I want, and he tells me what I can or can't have. And between the two of us, what evolves is a visual plan for the shooting, and it may be adjusted any number of times, but the lines get very blurry there. It's an intrinsic relationship. He tells me compositional notes, I talk to him about movement and speed, and once in a while we even talk about exposure.
On any motion picture, the director of photography is responsible for capturing the images that are recorded on the film. The director of photography artistically is deciding what most people probably wouldn't understand. It's really about lighting. Lighting is 80% of the director of photography's responsibility. Next would come shot selection, lenses, and composition. Those kind of things really are down the list, because the light is what really forms the image on the film, and if that's not as good as it could be or should be, then you're failing.
The producer is the person who, from the very beginning, gets the phone call and somebody says, you know, we want to make a movie. So the startup of everything was to get a script in order, find a director, find all of our line producer people, our production managers, our DPs, make sure that all the money was in place, that the budget was properly done, to find the locations, to then find the talent, all in keeping with the budget that we have. And then, of course, post-production, and we go all the way through to the end. By the time I'm done with this film, I will have worked 2.5 years on it.
The job of the assistant director is to execute the plan of the director and the creative team. Today they've asked us to cover a high school football game here in Texas, and we have 2 cameras. We've decided to cover the arrival of the teams, we've decided to cover the events which surround the game, the cheerleaders, the band, the game itself, and then hopefully incorporate that into the film.
In an IMAX theater, you're seeing an image that's projected 15 perforations along a 65mm negative, so it's about this large, and get that huge negative space gives us at least what we would call in the digital world 4K, in other words 4,000 pixels per line of resolution. So that's greater than the best resolution on most television screens, and it's even greater than HD TV.
With this camera that we're using now, it's not that much bigger than 35 production cameras. It used to be with some of the older models that when you were dealing with 105 pounds, that was really a big difference. But this is really a much more production-friendly camera. But then you do have inherent differences. When a magazine only lasts 3 minutes and a roll of film costs $1,100, then it makes a big difference how much you roll and how long you can roll. If we're doing a scene that normally we would say change the mag because we're at the end of the roll, we might not get the whole thing. A lot of times we'll roll because to waste 150 feet of this film is really kind of a big deal. So we'll try to get it, try to squeak it through.
Because of the size of an IMAX screen, it necessitates a really large film type itself. This is an example. It's actually a test chart, so it's a thing used to align the camera or the projector in a 35 millimeter film projection system. And you can see each little frame is about the size of a postage stamp. If you compare and contrast that with the same type of film from the IMAX system, you can see it's quite a bit larger. In overall dimension, the film itself is twice as wide, but in an IMAX system they also turn the film sideways to run the camera and the projector. So the film frame itself ends up being just about 10 times more surface area than a 35 millimeter film. And so because of this larger film, we're able to have a lot more information and project a lot more information in a really clear, crisp image onto the screen.
The IMAX camera really is an amazing camera. You've seen the films, you've seen the amazing images that it takes. This camera has been all over the world. It's filmed probably on every continent of the world, and now it's here in Texas.
I think our film on Texas will show people who haven't ever been to every corner of the state things they haven't seen or haven't thought about. And even those that have been, I think it'll take them back to places they might be particularly fond of. And for people that aren't from Texas, we hope it will inspire them to perhaps come and see what the place is all about, come here and see the museum, maybe understand a little bit of how history, the land, and the people have all been interconnected for us for all these years.
Everybody is interested in Texas. They sometimes don't quite understand us, but they're intrigued, and I think that there's just a sense of fun and interest and uniqueness about Texas that we can convey in this film.
And this is a movie I think that you'll come away feeling that if I'm not a Texan, I'm going to get there as quickly as I can.
I hope that the audience, when they leave the theater, number one, say that they've had a kicking good time. Number two, say that they've learned something they didn't know before about whatever, Texas life, geography. And I think number three, that they've been emotionally moved in some way, that we are all human beings on the planet, but that we all exist together, and in spite of our differences, we share an amazing bond, and Texas is a great metaphor for that. If you asked me when I first arrived here, you know, as the director of the film, are you a Texan? I would have said no. And now you ask me, I'd say, you know, maybe I am a Texan.
You want to have a viewer have a good experience. You want them to sit through an IMAX film that you've worked on and enjoy it. And as a director of photography, I want them to be awed by the images and what we're able to capture and create. Because you want to have people feel proud if they're Texans of their state, and if they're not Texans, to wish they were.
Cut, print.
And that's a wrap.
Ooh, I got a baby, she's so doggone sweet. But I love slipping inside of who caress the seat. Slip behind the wheel, oh, what a thrill. I got a baby made of 2 tons of steel. Finest looking car ever rolled across the land. If you saw my baby, Lord, you know you'd understand. Yeah, slip behind the wheel, oh, what a thrill. I got a baby made of 2 tons.